Right, to start the player movement, we're going to go down to the bottom, right click, create, and then script, and I'm going to call the script player movement. Now this script is going to control quite a lot, so it's going to be kind of our walking, crouching, running, some of our mouse sensitivity stuff. So just to start off, what I'm going to do is just make some variables. So you can make variables here. A float is basically a number, is like what you will need to know to start off with. So because we want to set the speed to be a certain amount, if we don't set the speed to be a certain amount, it just won't move. So we're going to set that as 4F. We're going to do quite a lot of public floats here, so you'll have to just keep with me while I write these out. So we've got our sprint speed we need to set. I'm going to set that to 7 for now. We're going to do our crouch speed, and I'm going to set that to 2. We're going to do crouch height, crouch height, and we're going to set that to 1. And then public flow crouch, well, we've got a crouch height, we need our normal height now. I'm going to equal 2F. And then the last one we should need for now should be mouse sense. You have to bear with me, I can't spell very well, but I've got it in the end. Sensitivity, and that's going to equal 2F. So basically all these floats are just numbers that we're reading, and we can tell. If I go back into the scene, and I'll just kind of shut that down a little bit, and if I go to my player and I just drag and drop it there, you can see all the information's there for us, and we could change that if we wanted to. So if we go back, there's one other thing we need to do, is for this we are going to do require component type of character controller. Now the reason why I've wrote that in is if I go back to my player again and I press add component character controller, you can see it's got a load of information here, and this basically is stuff we can steal to get our character moving as quick as possible. If you're making like a really kind of expansive movement based game, you probably want to make your own, but for this it'll work fine. That's all we really need. That's all we need to really be worried about in any case. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a couple more things. So if we're doing stuff with the camera, we need to do transform, and then we're going to call it, let's call it player cam, like that. So the transform is just kind of, if we go back to the scene I'll show you, it's just kind of where the position is. So this is the transform function, so we can call the rotation, the scale, the position. So because we've got the camera, we might be editing kind of the position of the camera, the rotation, stuff like that. We'll need to grab a reference. So this one's going to be private. That's going to be the character controller, and we're just going to call it controller. Now the reason we call it private is because when we set it later, it's already going to be on the object, so there's no reason to drag it in. Meanwhile, the player camera is going to be underneath the object as a child. So if we go back, the camera I'll have to drag and drop here, like that. The way we're going to use the character controller is I'll just say, can you get the character controller on my current object? We'll do public float, vertical rotation, and we're going to put 0F. And then we're going to do, let's do a public, not a private, let's do public in, and I'm going to call this page count. So this is just for my collection for now. We're going to move that about later most likely, but I can leave it there for now. But that's like all the variable sets. That's everything we need to play with. When you're scripting, a lot of the time you will have to go and add more, or go and replace some, or change it up, and that's absolutely fine. But just to start off, we need to set a couple of things. So the controller we just need to grab, so we need to do get component I'm going to do character controller, and that is literally going to grab it from the game object. So where we've set it in the editor here, it's just going to grab that. Then underneath, we're going to set up this function. Cursor dot lock state equals cursor block mode dot locked. And once again, that literally is just gonna, this statement just locks the cursor, so when you're playing a game on PC, the cursor will disappear and you can't leave kind of the screen of where it's being played, and that's because of that function. So that's just what we're going to do there. And then what we need to do is we need to start creating some function. So we're going to start with public void move player. Now functions are like where you're going to call most of your scripting. So we're going to do float speed equals walk speed. So to start off, that will be the speed of the character, and then what we need to do is start putting some if input dot get key, and we'll do key code dot, let's do left shift for sprint, and we'll do speed equals sprint speed, and then we'll have to do the same. So we can copy and paste this statement and do if it is left control, we're going to equal crouch speed, and we're also going to need to change controller dot height to equal crouch height. And then basically for this if statement, we're going to use an else. And that is literally just going to cover our bums when we go controller dot height equals normal height. So basically, if we're pressing control, we'll go lower our height. If we're not pressing control, we'll be a normal height. And that works. That's what we need to do. That's absolutely fine. Now, luckily, a lot of the code, we're just stealing information that's already stored within Unity. So input, so we do equals input dot get axes. We're going to call it horizontal. I think I spelled that right. And then what we do is we'll copy this line, we'll paste underneath, and we're just going to change that X to Z. So it's going to move Z, and then we just need to change that to vertical. And then down here, we're going to do vector 3. Now, if you did vector maths in school, you understand what that means. If you don't, vector 3 is basically talking about something in 3D where we're talking about all of the axes and then kind of relating information to that. So you've got your X, your Y, and your Z. If you're in 2D, you're using vector 2s, but for 3D, we're using vector 3. We do transform dot right. We're going to times it by move X plus transform dot forward, and then we're going to times that by move Z. And all we're doing there is kind of getting all the information we need, using our axes, kind of getting when the player is moving and relating it. And the best way to relate it is to controller dot move in brackets move, and we want to times it by the speed, so we're setting that when we're crouching and running and just walking as normal. And then we have to times it by time dot delta time, and that's basically because we need to get the information of what the actual game is. So if it's going like 1 second, 1 second, 1 second like normal time, we have to grab that. If we wanted to do it differently, where we're doing half speed, we could do delta time divided by 2 or something, but we should have move player there. Now if I copy and paste move player here, and I'll just go back to the scene, just have a look, press play, you can see we're moving about. However, the camera's not moving right now. So we're just going to go back and we're going to add that camera in. If you've not got that working, go back in there and have a look at where your current logic is. Void, and we're going to call it look around. And this one, it's going to kind of use a similar logic, but a bit different. So we're going to do mouse X, and we're going to do input dot get axes, and we're going to do mouse X, and we're going to times that by mouse sensitivity, and then we're going to do float mouse Y equals input dot get axes mouse Y, and that's because we move the mouse on the Y and X axes in real life, unlike us moving our game character, where if we moved on the Y he'd just be flying up. We don't want to do that, so we're using the Z there. And then we do vertical rotation minus equals mouse Y. So our vertical rotation will be whatever mouse Y is doing, because that will be going up and down. And then we will also do a little bit of a clamp, and a clamp is just to stop it from like imagine you were looking up, and if you just kept looking up and then your head went backwards, it'd be horrific. So we don't want that happening. So we're going to do vertical rotation minus 90F and then 90F. Cool. Now we need to go to player camera. We need to get our information, so the local rotation. So we're taking from that transform that was in the top right of the editor the information we need. And I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. So local rotation, we want to do, let's have a think. We're going to use something that I can't say, and I'd say that in every video, so if this is not your first video, I'm very apologise. But this basically, this big word here uses the rotation, so that represents all rotations. So it's a lot of tricky language in Unity. Once you understand when you need it, that will be the best. But yeah, so that is basically getting our vertical rotation. Then transform dot rotate, and we're going to do vector, do vector 3, because we're in a 3D space, up, and then we're just going to times that by mouse X. Now if we go back in, one thing I need to do is just set it into my update with my move player, so every frame it's going to be looking at where am I looking, what am I doing, am I moving, and that gets all that information for us. So we press play again, and as you can see, if you move your mouse now, you should be looking around. The vertical rotation thing should be going a bit mental, but we can walk around, we can run, we can crouch and we slow down a little bit. We can run again, crouch, slow down, run again, crouch, slow down. But yeah, that's like your player movements now done. Next thing we'll look at is trying to get that enemy to start kind of chasing us about.